But Edgar County Watchdogs is a fantastic organization. The AFB has had partnerships with them for a long time, but Edgar County is like a small county in central Illinois. Probably less than 50,000 people in the county, but just a couple of individuals there that have built up an organization that has led to the resignation of over 600 elected officials across the state of Illinois. A lot of times what they do is that they look for Open Meetings Act violations or violations that they find through FOIA. And they're really just a powerhouse for just a small group of people. And we've had them speak at our events in the past. We've partnered with them. We've had them go around the country to kind of share their stories. And so, even if you feel like you're a small organization in a small county.
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential.
Hey everyone, welcome to the American Potential Podcast. I'm your host, David Fromm. Have you ever scrolled through social media and seen one of those stories about your local government, blowing a ridiculous amount of money on some project? That makes just zero sense. Yeah, you probably thought, who approved that? Well, chances are the only reason you're even hearing about it is because a watchdog group dug it up. Today, we're talking with a guy who's been a watchdog for a while, and now he's teaching others in his state how to do it too. He learned pretty quick that being a watchdog isn't just about calling out nonsense. It's about keeping our elected officials honest and making sure that they remember whose money they're spending. I want to welcome to the podcast Brian Costin, who's the Deputy State Director for Americans for Prosperity in Illinois. Brian, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here, David.
Yeah, welcome back. I know we've done some previous episodes talking about some of the really cool, specific watchdog type activities that you've engaged in. As you know, we both live in the suburbs of Chicago in Illinois. It's a tough place to be a liberty-minded, fiscally conservative person.
Can be.
Yeah, but it also means that it's it's even more important that we keep an eye on how our elected officials are spending our taxpayer money. We've been friends for a while, and I know that you're doing a great job helping other people, but especially, really yourself digging in and holding elected officials accountable. So I appreciate that because, you're watching my tax dollars too. So how'd you develop a passion for this and then start down this road of being a watchdog for government?
Yeah, I think the first thing that I remember as I was kind of like thinking back in preparation for this podcast, the first thing that I actually remember was about 14 years old. There was a carousel built in an athletic complex in Elk Grove Village, and that carousel cost $1 million. And I just remember at the time, I wasn't very politically inclined, but I thought, oh my God, that is an astronomical sum of money for a carousel inside an activity center. They had a referendum to build it in the pavilion in Elk Grove. But then later on, really one of the first things that piqued my interest is that Illinois Policy Institute was participating in Sunshine Week in Illinois. And I had a friend who worked there, Richard Lawrence, and he's like, yeah, you should participate. Take this one-page flyer to a local board meeting. It's a proposal to make government more transparent. And I was like, okay. And I remember going to the meeting in Schaumburg, Illinois, where I lived at the time, and I was nervous. I've never spoken in front of a public body before. And I gave my short little presentation, and they said, okay, thank you. We'll think about it. And then a couple weeks later, I came back to something called the Coffee with the Council, which is more of an informal discussion that you can have with a couple of people on the council. And I remember asking them, well, what do you think? Do you want to implement this? Do you want to put more taxpayer spending online? And the now mayor of Schaumburg, Tom Daly, said that he was insulted that we suggested that they're not transparent, and it's ridiculous to be doing this level of transparency. It's excessive, all of that. And I was like, wait a minute. I always thought this was going to be an easy slam dunk here, like something good to do, something positive. And I was surprised at the pushback from it. And so I kind of got into it accidentally. And from there, I started to become a watchdog in Schaumburg and got a lot deeper into it in looking at government spending.
Yeah, isn't it incredible? It always surprises me when elected officials are either offended or even flippant about increased transparency. I mean, the public should, as long as it doesn't cost the government a crazy amount of money, I mean, the government should really be as transparent as humanly possible, right? I mean, it's kind of crazy.
Absolutely. And that was one of the things that they cited, in that doing this and updating their website would be very costly for them to do. And I was like, really? It's just like putting a couple of documents online on a website that you already have. It's not really reinventing the wheel. And so after they refused, I was like, you know what? This isn't good enough for me. I started my own website. I started doing FOIA requests at that time. It did cost some money to do it and then scan it and put it online. But I did that. I took that cost. So the documents that the Village of Schaumburg said that they would not put online, I started putting online myself, and it was relatively cheap. But basically, the only cost was me paying the fees that the government told me I had to pay in order to obtain the documents. And so I started putting it online, and then I started digging deeper and deeper into the spending and kind of shamed them into becoming more transparent over time. So we were successful in making, first we did it ourselves, and then ultimately the government agency started like, okay, maybe it's not so crazy. Maybe we can do this if a private citizen is. And they started doing it as well.
So what were some of the craziest things that you've found either from that time or since?
Yeah, so I have a little bit of a spidey sense in regards to finding wasteful government spending. And so if I see an empty trolley, in this case in Schaumburg, I'm like, how much is that costing the taxpayers? Because they have a trolley at the Woodfield Mall, which is the big mall in Schaumburg, just down the road from here. And it was always empty. Like, what are they doing? And so I found out that was costing taxpayers like $350,000 a year for this trolley to go around empty. Another one is the Schaumburg Convention Center, which is run by a private organization, but it's a taxpayer-owned building, and that costs $228 million. So that's one's really expensive. And so after getting the information, I tried to figure out like, well, how much is this really costing the taxpayers of Schaumburg every single year? And including lost property tax revenue, you're talking about like $15 to $17 million per year that convention center is costing the taxpayers of Schaumburg. It's pretty incredible sum of money. But now, like, I think that going from there in modern day, I think it's never been a better time to be a government watchdog, because there's all sorts of new tools, including AI, that can really help unlock, making it easier to file FOIA requests, easier to find wasteful government spending. And so I think we're kind of in a dawn of a new era.
Wow, that is exciting. I guess, yeah, having AI do a lot of the work for you could be super helpful. So some of the basics of watchdog activity and holding government accountable are Freedom of Information Act requests. They're sometimes called open records requests or something, depending what state you're in. Maybe take us through like some of the building blocks of how you seek to expose spending, or at least make it transparent and hold government officials accountable.
Yeah, well, first, it's trying to get as much information as you possibly can, starting with what is already in existence, what is already online, and start digging through that. I like to look at the annual budgets and the annual financial reports. Those are kind of where you can see the trends over time. You can see, government spending is increasing by 10, 15% a year, or in some cases even more than that. That's a good place to start looking. Another thing is a lot of local governments have what's called a treasurer's report, or an annual statement of affairs, which kind of like summarizes everything that's in the annual financial report. It also tells you who all of the third-party vendors that your local government is working with. And so we had a government watchdog training here in our office in Rolling Meadows a couple months ago, where We printed that out, Village of Schaumburg, and we just had people go through it and just be like, let's ask questions. What looks weird? Fireworks, or some kind of art project, or something that you didn't really know what it was. And then once you get to that point where you're curious about something, that's when you would file a Freedom of Information Act request to get documents related to whatever that expenditure is. And that's where you start digging deeper and deeper. Another thing is just to keep your eyes open. If something looks really ritzy and it could be, I remember in Schaumburg, there was a sign right off of 53 saying, "Welcome to Schaumburg." And I found out it cost like $750,000 to build a sign. I'm like, wow, that's a lot of money for a lot of taxpayers. And it's just kind of a something you just got to keep your eyes open. And then getting to AI, if you want to fill out a FOIA request, they can basically do it for you. Mm-hmm. You just tell them what you're looking for, and it's relatively easy from there. They'll help do all of the work for you.
So that's great. I mean, when someone's doing a FOIA request, can you kind of take us through? I know it differs from state to state, but what are some of the obstacles, or what are some of the hoops you got to jump through to take one of those early steps?
Well, the FOIA rules are different in all 50 states. So one, it's to find out what are the state laws in your area. And like in Illinois, it's gotten easier. They've made some reforms over time. You can get the first 50 pages for free if you file a fee waiver request. As long as it's not a commercial request, you're just a private citizen or a news organization, you can get a lot of that for free. But the first thing is to figure out what your state laws are in regards to FOIA, and what is the basic cost of filing a FOIA. The second step is really to know what is allowable for you to get underneath the law. So in Illinois, there's a lot of things that you can get, but there are certain things that you can't. For example, if something is considered pre-decisional, where the government is trying to formulate a policy and they haven't come to a decision yet, that is largely exempted from the Freedom of Information Act. Another thing is personal information. Like, you can't get government employees' social security numbers or home addresses for a good reason. So it's just about familiarizing yourself with what the state laws are in your area. And that's something that you can research either. There's various different sunshine groups across the country, but also using ChatGPT or an AI to kind of get a list of what are the things that you can and cannot get via FOIA.
So if people are thinking about trying to increase transparency and really take on watchdog activities in their community, what are some of the starting points and what are the obstacles to them getting involved? Because you've trained a number of people, and dozens at least, if not hundreds. And, a lot of folks have gone on to really be pretty effective. So what are some of the, I don't know, not only for the tricks, I guess the roadmap to being effective?
Yeah, I think number one, the number one characteristic that someone needs to have is to be curious, and also to have a little bit of bravery, because a lot of times I see people that are like really interested and pretty smart and get it and can identify stuff, but there's still like this fear of filing a FOIA, asking for information which other people might find to be sensitive. And so getting over that hurdle and filing the first FOIA sometimes is really hard for people. But if you can get beyond that and get past that first FOIA, it gets easier and easier and easier. And I think that we have to have the mental model where this is your money that the government is spending. So you have every right to get that information, because that's, in a democracy, information is the most important currency. And if you have that mentality and you can get past that hurdle of filing the first FOIA, it becomes much, much easier.
I think one of the hardest things is with that first step is the idea that we're asking someone to kind of open up the books and they may be offended. Or they might be like, why are you doing this? Do you think I did something wrong? I'm an honest person. And it's like, no, we just want to see, we were entitled to it. I think emotionally for a lot of people, that's a difficult first step. I can tell you a story. I filed a Freedom of Information Act request with my local school district because there's a referendum to raise our taxes, and they had I was kind of curious as to what the coordination was between the Vote Yes committee, which is political in nature, and the school board and the administration. And so I filed an open meetings request. And what I found out was that they were absolutely coordinating. There was people on school district time helping the Vote Yes committee raise money and, carry out activities, give out yard signs and all that, which is actually illegal. I also then found by looking at the disclosure reports and the election stuff that vendors who were already actively, had contracts with the school district were donating to the Vote Yes committee. And in fact, the school district was pointing those vendors in that direction to be solicited for these donations, also not legal. So anyway, I packaged that all up and I gave it to a reporter because I happen to, in politics, I have reporters, and the editor actually refused to run it because it was supposedly 2 weeks, like it was too soon before the election, which is a cop out. I just think that they didn't really want to get sideways with the local government because that's who they had to cover for, years and years into the future. And, but it was stunning to me, frankly, that I felt like I did a really good job packaging this all up and presented it to the press in this case, because I wanted to make a difference in the election. And, they just passed. And, now I didn't take it further to, any legal authorities or anything like that. So I think sometimes we can do the best job we want and then not get the payout that we want. But there are other ways to kind of have justice done. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to kind of confirm what you've seen, I've seen the exact same thing numerous times, is that the vendors that, say, a school district hires to do the public information campaign, which is a legal thing that they're allowed to do, a little bit questionable whether or not and how one-sided they are. They're not legally supposed to say vote yes or vote no, but they present the facts in a way which leads you to one determination over another, that then go and work with the campaign side of things as well. It's super common. I remember there was a whole bunch of school facility sales tax referendums going on across the state of Illinois. And back when I worked at Illinois Policy, I found that there was always the same company that was involved called Stifel Nicholas, which is a bond company out of St. Louis. And after the tax referendums pass, they would be first in line to get the money to service the bond or to bring the bond to market. And so there's all sorts of this kind of insidious types of things that happen in local government where either they're sometimes illegal or sometimes they're legal, but probably unethical. But I think that there's opportunities to kind of raise the banner for ethical government. One of the things that I definitely recommend people to do is to start your own website or start your own Facebook group where you can have an outlet for the things that you find to start a discussion. I remember this one time back, I created this organization after the transparency measure kind of got blocked. I started an organization called the Schaumburg Freedom Coalition, and we started putting up information online. And over time, we got a certain level of respect from the media and also from people who worked inside the government. And we started getting tips from people who were working inside the village of Schaumburg government. And so anonymous. So to this day, I don't know who that person is, but I got a tip that the Schaumburg Flyers at the time hadn't been paying their rent to the Park District and Village. Meanwhile, they were making campaign contributions to the mayor. And so they alerted us to this and we're like, okay, that's a spicy accusation. Let's do a FOIA request to confirm what's going on. We file a FOIA request. And right as we got our results back, they filed a lawsuit against the owner of the Schaumburg Flyers. And so I believe that they got scared that we started pecking around at something that was potentially politically explosive. And it
Sure.
led to changes where they started collecting that money and eventually evicted that person from the stadium and replaced it with someone who did pay their bills on time. So there's lots of little victories that you can get, even if you might not get the ultimate victory of, I don't know, getting someone in jail type of victory for doing illegal things.
So I am familiar with a lot of your work. I think it's just been fabulous. Maybe tell us a little bit about our partnership with the Edgar County Watchdogs and what they've done, because I just think they have a lot of cool stories. And then I'd love to hear about the most recent activity in Rochester, Illinois.
Yeah, absolutely. So Edgar County Watchdogs is a fantastic organization. AFB has had partnerships with them for a long time, but Edgar County is like a small county in central Illinois, probably less than 50,000 people in the county, but just a couple of individuals there that have built up an organization that has led to the resignation of over 600 elected officials across the state of Illinois. A lot of times what they do is that they look for Open Meetings Act violations or violations that they find through FOIA. And they're really just a powerhouse for just a small group of people. And we've had them speak at our events in the past. We've partnered with them. We've had them go around the country to kind of share their stories. And so, even if you feel like you're a small organization in a small county, there is the ability through years and years of work to have an outsized influence on the political landscape in your community by you getting engaged, just filing FOIAs, showing up to public meetings, and really, really impressive work that they do. So
they've really, I mean, John and Kurt have been, the Edgar County Watchdogs are really such a great example of dude, these are, I think, retired guys who decided, who really took offense at what they thought was some egregious violations in their park district, and they're just some of the stuff going on in their little town. They actually performed a citizen's arrest of the park district board that was upheld by the law enforcement folks for violating the Open Meetings Act. But I think that they're an inspiration to a lot of folks because they've made real change. They found some serious criminal activity, even like misappropriation of firearms to criminals by law enforcement. It's just, they knew how to dig. They know how to use the tools, and they're conversant in the law, even though they're not lawyers, and they made a real difference. And I think that the more we can, this is why I think your work is so important. The more that we can help empower people with these tools and the inspiration, the more, the better government that we get and the better use of taxpayers that we get, the taxpayer dollars that we get.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's what we're trying to work forward here with Americans for Prosperity, is to build a bigger culture of watchdog activity. So we're hosting events all over the state. We're creating groups that are kind of designed to build a community to foster help amongst people from doing watchdog activity all across the state of Illinois, but building a culture to, obviously in Illinois, we have a culture of corruption. 4 governors out of the past 8 or 9 that have ended up in jail have some of the highest corruption rates in the country, if not the top when it comes to the Northern Illinois district. Just to really create a community around the concept of keeping an eye on what's going on with the government and calling it out when they're doing something that's wrong or illegal.
Yeah. So I know you've been busy in Rochester, Illinois, also kind of smallish town in central Illinois. Yeah. Maybe tell that story for us.
Sure. So we got a tip that there was a referendum going on in Rochester for the Rochester Library. They wanted to expand their building, but they were kind of incredulous on how big the referendum was. It would more than double the property tax there. And so they asked us to kind of look around. And so we did. And the first question that I had was okay, how big is the referendum? It turns out it was 169%. So I'm like, wow, that's really big. But I started poking around. And as I was doing that, I saw that they created committees specifically for the passage of the referendum. They created committees that included the words vote yes in the name of the community, which is a violation of the State Employees and Ethics Act. It's a misdemeanor to be engaged in that, and you can get a fine of up to $5,000 and a year in jail for making a violation of that type. And so we started doing FOIAs, and then the FOIAs came back, and we found even more instances of them violating the law. Things such as the executive director talking about fundraising for the Vote Yes committee, encouraging the nonprofit that's attached to the library to make a political campaign contribution to the referendum committee to pass a tax hike into place. We had the board president go on camera in the library with the library's logo superimposed on it, saying, "We need you to vote yes on this referendum, and contact us. Here's our emails if you want to get involved in this campaign," on camera. Pretty crazy that a lot of times when you see these kind of crimes being committed, they're much more secretive about it and careful. They were just brazen in their violations of the law. Altogether, we found 35 different violations. We found out about the Ethics Act in Illinois, which requires local governments to have ethics commissions. Most of them never, ever meet, but we filed an ethics complaint with them. They had a 3-member board. 2 of them ended up getting appointed by the people we filed complaints against after we had already filed the complaint. And so we went through that process, and we were fairly successful. The ethics committee, because of the way that we documented things, they were caught red-handed, but they got out on a technicality because they said that they did not adequately define in their ordinance what prohibited political activity was, and therefore they couldn't do anything about it. But the state law says you must enact an ordinance that's no less restrictive than the state law, and then clearly defines what all the prohibited political activities are. So they came back and they said, you need to follow these laws, you need to change your ordinance, but we're not actually punishing anyone. And so then when we went to the state's attorney, we went to the attorney general, and ultimately went to the FBI and shared with them what we had found. What we found is that we need better ethics laws in the state of Illinois that's actually going to have someone that's responsible for bringing prosecution when employees and elected officials are violating state law. We currently don't really have that in the state of Illinois. Now, there's a chance that the FBI might do something about it. They were probably the most responsive and detailed in talking to us about what exactly went on. And in the state of Illinois, if you want to fight public corruption, it's probably the FBI that you want to take your information to, because generally the state's attorney at the county level and the attorney general at the state level really don't do a whole lot on public corruption. I'd say more than 95% of the public corruption cases come from FBI investigations. We hope something will come from it, but not really. Nothing has come from it yet. So we're a little bit disappointed in that. So we need stronger state laws in Illinois, and I would guess most states across the country do as well.
Yeah. I think it's so important to, as a deterrent. I mean, even if we don't, send people to jail or, have contracts stopped per se, when the sunshine is shown, I think it's a big deterrent to folks who are, might do something a little unethical, or might try to get something for a buddy, or might just be lazy or kind of not paying attention to the law. When they see that there's folks like them, elected officials, who are being held accountable, or maybe are subject to criminal prosecution, or at least are getting a lot of bad press, they tend to, I think, go back and dot their I's and cross their T's. And I think that's an important part of being a watchdog, is to say, hey, we're here, we're being vigilant, we're gonna find out if you're and uncover if you're doing something unethical here or wasting taxpayer dollars, so that we can encourage elected officials to just engage in better and more responsible behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. And so from the Rochester investigation, we saw that one of the consultants that regularly consults a lot of the local governments in these referendum processes used the Rochester case and said, hey, you need to have someone who's not going to violate state law. This is a big risk that you have. You need to make sure that you're operating appropriately within the law. And another example is just down the road. We heard that something like similar might be going on a couple miles away from Rochester in Chatham, Illinois. And so we looked at their website. We're like, hey, these things are borderline violating the law on your website and promoting this referendum. We called them and they got really scared really fast. They changed all the language on their website within like a day or two. And so there's impacts that you can have by start developing a reputation to being a government watchdog that goes maybe beyond what your initial investigation is.
Yeah, that's great, man. That's good. I appreciate the work that you're doing, particularly in my neck of the woods where you're hopefully saving me taxpayer dollars. But
hopefully.
Yeah. Well, keep up the good work. I think it's a great way to help also engage folks who are liberty-minded or fiscally conservative into the process to try to just build out that base of people who want to fight for better policy and real accountability in local and state and federal government. So
absolutely.
Thanks for your work, Brian. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks. Well, hey, folks, if you like this podcast and would like to stay connected with the podcast, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, as well as following us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And always remember, liberty and freedom are easily taken for granted. Don't take it for granted. Go out there and defend freedom and liberty. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.